Russia's actions in Ukraine, particularly its invasion in February 2022, are driven by several factors that combine political, strategic, and historical motivations. These can be broken down into a few key reasons. Russia has long viewed Ukraine as part of its sphere of influence, and the country's westward shift towards the European Union and NATO is seen as a threat to Russian dominance in the region. President Vladimir Putin has expressed concerns about NATO's expansion, and Ukraine's potential membership in the alliance would be seen as a direct challenge to Russia's strategic security. Russia considers Ukraine to be an integral part of its historical and cultural heritage, with deep-rooted connections dating back to the medieval state of Kievan Rus. Putin has often emphasized the shared history between Russia and Ukraine, framing the conflict as part of a broader narrative about restoring Russia's greatness and reasserting its influence over former Soviet territories. Ukraine has significant agricultural output, energy resources, and strategic access to the Black Sea. For Russia, controlling or influencing Ukraine's resources is economically beneficial and provides strategic military advantages, especially with regard to ports like Crimea's Sevastopol, a critical naval base for Russia. The invasion also serves to solidify Putin's power domestically. By focusing on an external enemy, Putin can rally nationalistic sentiment within Russia, distract from internal issues like economic challenges and political dissent, and strengthen his grip on power by portraying himself as a defender of Russian interests. Russia fears a NATO presence on its western border, particularly with the alliance's increasing military cooperation with Ukraine. The prospect of NATO forces being stationed in Ukraine is seen as unacceptable to Moscow, as it could undermine Russia's strategic depth and military security. Russia's actions in Ukraine are driven by a mix of defensive security concerns, ambitions to maintain regional dominance, historical claims, and internal political considerations. These motivations have led to the ongoing conflict with profound humanitarian, economic, and geopolitical consequences. As of now, the war between Russia and Ukraine remains unresolved, with no definitive victory for either side. The conflict, which began in February 2022 with Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, has become a prolonged and costly war. Both sides have faced significant challenges, and the situation continues to evolve. Ukraine has shown strong resistance, supported by military aid, weapons, and financial assistance from Western allies like the US, NATO countries, and others. Key successes include retaking territories like Kyiv, Kharkiv, and Kherson regions earlier in the war. Russia has maintained control over parts of eastern Ukraine, e.g., parts of Donetsk, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia regions, and continues to assert dominance in these areas. However, its military has faced logistical challenges, heavy casualties, and morale issues. The war has settled into a grinding stalemate, with both sides conducting limited offensives. Ukraine's 2023 counteroffensive made incremental gains but did not achieve a breakthrough. Russia faces international sanctions that have strained its economy, though it has adapted somewhat. Ukraine's economy has suffered extensively due to the destruction of infrastructure and displacement of millions of people. A decisive victory for either side remains uncertain, as the conflict could continue indefinitely or shift based on diplomatic negotiations, changes in global support, or battlefield developments. The ongoing war in Ukraine has resulted in heavy casualties on both sides, with estimates highlighting the immense human toll. Russian casualties are reportedly over 600,000, including approximately 300,000 killed and 300,000 wounded. These figures are significantly higher than most earlier estimates and reflect the intense nature of the conflict, particularly along the Eastern Front. Ukraine has also suffered significant losses, with estimates of 70,000 soldiers killed and an additional 100,000 to 120,000 wounded. Civilians have not been spared, with thousands killed and millions displaced since the invasion began in February 2022. The fighting has devastated cities like Bakhmut and resulted in widespread destruction. The high casualty rates on both sides underscore the brutal and prolonged nature of the conflict, characterized by trench warfare, artillery duels, and widespread use of mines and drones. The war has also caused extensive suffering among civilians, with many areas rendered uninhabitable due to constant shelling and landmines. Russia has periodically issued warnings and threats to the UK in the context of ongoing geopolitical tensions, especially since the start of the Ukraine conflict. The main reasons include: the UK is one of Ukraine's most vocal and active supporters in its defense against Russia's invasion. It has provided military aid, including weapons like long-range missiles and tanks, as well as financial and humanitarian assistance. Russia perceives this support as direct involvement in the conflict, heightening tensions. The UK has imposed significant sanctions on Russian individuals, businesses, and state entities. These measures have targeted oligarchs, banks, and the energy sector, aiming to weaken Russia's war economy. Russia views these actions as hostile. The UK has been active in condemning Russia on international platforms, from the United Nations to NATO. Additionally, UK intelligence agencies have exposed alleged Russian espionage activities and cyber attacks, further straining relations. The UK is a key NATO member, and its participation in military exercises and deployments near Russia's borders is often cited by Moscow as a provocation. NATO's expansion and activities are a long-standing grievance for Russia. Russia often uses rhetoric against Western countries, including the UK, to solidify domestic support. This includes accusations of colonialism, interference in sovereign matters, and Russophobia. Specific threats may relate to new sanctions, increased arms supplies to Ukraine, or escalations like the UK training Ukrainian pilots or supplying advanced weaponry. Russia's rhetoric also serves to dissuade further UK involvement by framing it as a risk to national security. The UK's stance, meanwhile, remains firm in supporting Ukraine, citing international law and the need to resist aggression. These countries have explicitly or implicitly sided with Russia or have been accused of providing military or economic assistance. Belarus is Russia's closest ally in the conflict, allowed its territory to be used as a staging ground for Russian troops during the initial invasion, provides logistical support, including training grounds and supply routes, shares intelligence and facilitates operations along Ukraine's northern border. Iran is the major supplier of military technology. Supplies drones, e.g. Shahed kamikaze drones, used extensively by Russia to target Ukrainian infrastructure. Alleged plans to provide ballistic missiles, although this remains unconfirmed. North Korea is the military aid supplier, accused of supplying ammunitions, artillery shells, and other weapons to Russia via covert channels. Offers rhetorical support in international forums, blaming NATO for the conflict. A wide range of countries, organizations, and individuals are supporting Ukraine in its defense against Russia's invasion. This support includes military aid, financial assistance, humanitarian aid, and diplomatic backing. Below are some of the main supporters. United States is the largest single donor to Ukraine, providing billions of dollars in military aid, including weapon systems, e.g. HIMARS, drones and tanks, ammunition and training. Financial support includes direct economic assistance and contributions to humanitarian efforts. Many European Union nations, including Germany, Poland, France, and the Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia, have provided weapons, financial aid, and logistical support. NATO collectively has bolstered Ukraine with intelligence sharing, weapons, and training programs. United Kingdom's significant military contributions, including advanced systems like Storm Shadow missiles, Challenger 2 tanks, and anti-aircraft weapons. Canada provides financial and military aid, including armored vehicles, drones, and artillery systems. Other supportive nations are Australia, Japan, and South Korea, non-NATO countries offering financial and humanitarian aid. Some have provided non-lethal military assistance. Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Denmark, supplying advanced weaponry and financial support. The possibility of the Russia-Ukraine war escalating into a World War III scenario is a concern, but it largely depends on several key factors. They are: if NATO member states were directly attacked by Russia or vice versa, it could trigger Article 5 of the NATO treaty, which commits members to collective defense. This would significantly raise the stakes and could escalate the conflict into a global war. Any use of nuclear weapons, whether tactical or strategic, could provoke a massive international response, potentially drawing in other nuclear-armed states and escalating the conflict globally. The involvement of other nations through proxy wars or regional alliances could complicate the situation. For example, If other powers like China or Iran took more direct roles in support of Russia, or if additional countries opposed to NATO became involved, the risk of escalation would increase. Economic and cyber conflicts. A continued escalation in economic warfare or cyber attacks could lead to retaliation that spirals out of control, impacting a broader range of nations. The lack of effective diplomacy or dialogue between major powers increases the risk of miscalculation or misunderstanding, which could lead to broader conflict. While the war is currently contained as a regional conflict with global repercussions, the risk of it evolving into a larger conflict exists, especially if red lines are crossed. However, nations are generally aware of the catastrophic consequences of a world war and are likely to pursue measures to avoid such an outcome. Stop war.